For some folks, seeing those 2 lines on a pregnancy test is like hitting the jackpot. For others, it's more like a kick in the gut. And for our main gal, well, it's the latter. Just a month ago, she was kicking it with her buddies, Miran and Min-wook, munching on pizza and shooting the breeze. Then, out of the blue, they drop the big news: they're dating. And just like that, their first day as a couple was official. Even though she felt like she'd taken a punch to the gut, she slapped on a smile and tossed out her congrats. After all, they were friends, right? The 3 of them, Miran, Min-wook, and her, had been tight since their middle school days. In fact, she and Min-wook go way back to their sandbox days, with Miran joining the gang later on. But honestly, they'd been a trio for so long that it was hard to remember who became buddies with whom first. She'd always figured they'd stick together, just the 3 musketeers. But hearing about their relationship, she felt like she'd been sucker-punched. She'd kept her feelings for Min-wook under wraps, not wanting to mess up their perfect trio. But now, she wished she'd spilled her guts to him when she had the chance. Seeing the 2 of them together, completely oblivious to her heartache, felt like a betrayal. She knew there was no fairy tale ending for her one-sided love. She wasn't about to throw caution to the wind and have a random one-night stand. But then Miran, with her trademark oversharing is caring attitude, started bragging about Min-wook's bedroom skills. That got her thinking. Why couldn't she have a bit of that fun? So, she decided to hit the town, ready to wave goodbye to 27 years of untouched innocence. Fast forward to now, and she's staring at a positive pregnancy test when Miran barges in. Quick as a cat, she tries to cover it up, claiming she's exercising for stamina. But Miran's no fool. She spots the test and demands answers. In a whirlwind of confusion, our gal spills the beans about her one-night stand, leaving Miran feeling guilty for suggesting the bar where it all went down. But there's no time for self-blame. Miran insists they head to the clinic after work. Later that day, Hee-won walks into the clinic sporting a new look, almost incognito. Miran, puzzled, asks her about the getup. Hee-won explains she needs to keep a low profile, given her status as a role model. However, Miran points out that her disguise is more conspicuous than her regular attire. She reminds Hee-won that there's no shame in visiting a gynecologist and urges her to ditch the glasses. It turns out Miran anticipated Hee-won's anxiety and chose this upscale clinic to avoid any awkward encounters. Hee-won appreciates Miran's thoughtfulness, but her gratitude is cut short when she spots Min-wook at the clinic. Shocked, she questions Miran, who nonchalantly reveals she invited him, believing in the power of collective thinking. Hee-won protests, but Miran dismisses her concerns, reminding her of their long-standing friendship. Soon after, Miran brings up the topic of the man responsible for Hee-won's pregnancy, encouraging her to find him. As they discuss, Miran spots a girl in a school uniform resembling Hee-won's students, accompanied by a man. Hee-won is taken aback, having been assured of privacy at this clinic. On closer inspection, she recognizes the girl, Se-hyun Kong. Despite Miran's attempt to defuse the situation, Hee-won is concerned that the man might be exploiting Se-hyun. She approaches them, offering her support to the visibly confused Se-hyun. Things escalate quickly when Hee-won confronts the man, only to freeze on realizing he is the one responsible for her pregnancy. In the heat of the moment, Miran and Min-wook sprint towards Hee-won to put a lid on the brewing drama. But as they close in, they notice Hee-won's intense stare at a man and wonder what's cooking. Hee-won, jittery and wide-eyed, quickly rushes over to them and spills the beans. That man is her baby daddy. Miran, all fired up, makes a beeline for him but is intercepted by her cooler-headed boyfriend, Min-wook. Caught off guard, the man turns to the young girl, Se-hyun, asking who the fiery lady is. Se-hyun reveals that Hee-won is her homeroom teacher and introduces the man as her uncle, Do-jun Kong. Sensing Miran's skepticism, Se-hyun assures her that she's got nothing shady going on with her uncle, even offering to show legal documents if needed. Do-jun, trying to smooth things over, invites Hee-won to come closer for a proper introduction. Reluctantly, she steps forward, apologizing and quickly shifting her attention back to Se-hyun, curious about her presence at the clinic. Se-hyun explains that her family is a bit unusual, which prompts Do-jun to chime in, teasing about the normalcy of her getting a sibling. A flustered Se-hyun pleads with Hee-won to keep this hush-hush at school. Internally kicking herself for jumping to conclusions and reminding herself that not everyone's life revolves around pregnancy like hers. Hee-won answers Se-hyun's query about her clinic visit by pointing at her friends, jokingly referring to them as an engaged couple. Just as Hee-won is in the middle of her tall tale, the nurse calls her name for her appointment. Alarm bells ring, but her quick-thinking friends step in, pretending they are the ones here for a checkup, saving Hee-won from an awkward reveal. As the clock ticks away, they all find themselves camped in the waiting room. Hee-won is off playing doctor-patient, leaving Miran to shoot the breeze with Se-hyun. She nudges Se-hyun, asking if she's got someplace to be. Se-hyun, however, insists on sticking around for her teacher. Meanwhile, Miran is sneakily sizing up Do-jun Kong. Initially, she feared he'd be some lowlife, but he's surprisingly well-to-do. Plus, he's easy on the eyes and dressed to the nines. Is this guy loaded, she wonders. She's intrigued by his nonchalant attitude towards bumping into his one-night stand at a gyno clinic. She catches him deep in thought and itches to pick his brain. But she reins in her curiosity, for now. Lost in his thoughts, Do-jun Kong is trying to piece together the puzzle. Could she really be my one-night stand, he ponders. That was the first and only time he had ever done that, but boy, was it memorable. He remembers waking up feeling fantastic until he spotted the 2 bills she had left behind. It made him laugh at first, then stung his pride. Was that all he was worth to her? He spent ages trying to track her down, to no avail. And now, here she was, teaching his niece. He sneaks a peek at Min-wook, dismissing him as her husband. But one question keeps nagging him. Why is she visiting a gynecologist? Meanwhile, inside the doc's office, Hee-won is swallowing the news of her 6-week pregnancy. The doctor, oblivious to her solo visit, casually asks if her hubby tagged along. Hee-won's brain is a whirlwind of worry as she tries to figure out what to tell the doctor. But before she can get a word in, the doc interrupts her train of thought. We don't do abortions here, she says. If that's what you're after, you should look elsewhere. Hee-won's jaw drops. She fires back, calling out the doc for her rudeness. Sure. She's an unmarried mom-to-be, but that doesn't give the doc the right to throw the A-word around so casually. Annoyed and feeling judged, she exits the office. Upon leaving, she hears her student Se-hyun calling out her name. She turns around and is surprised to see Do-jun Kong still hanging around. Miran and Se-hyun hurry over, full of concern. Hee-won puts on a brave face and tells them she was there for a routine checkup, thanking them for their worry. Just when she thinks she's successfully dodged the bullet, a nurse pops out, reminding her not to forget her baby's ultrasound picture. The unexpected announcement leaves Se-hyun and Do-jun in shock. Later, at a cafe, Hee-won and Do-jun sit in awkward silence. She gulps down a glass of water, trying to shake off her nerves. When Do-jun points out her anxiety, she quickly denies it. As she tries to explain her situation, referring to him as Se-hyun's uncle, he cuts her off and corrects her, it's Do-jun Kong. She wonders if he's making fun of her. She pleads with him to separate her personal life from her professional one, assuring him she's a dedicated teacher. As she rambles on, Do-jun remains silent, leaving her feeling like she's the only one at fault. Exhausted, she gets ready to leave, but as she does, Do-jun drops the dreaded question, is it my child? Hee-won quickly shuts down Do-jun's suspicions, assuring him that he is not the father of her unborn child. His surprise is evident, but he suggests they continue their conversation and get to the bottom of things. Despite her initial hesitation, Hee-won agrees to sit back down and discuss the matter further. Do-jun can't help but question her story. She plans to marry another man, yet she was intimate with him. And now she's checking for pregnancy with her friends in tow. Something doesn't add up. But Hee-won dismisses his doubts, asserting that regardless of how her story appears, it's none of his concern. Confused and somewhat frustrated, Do-jun proposes they take some time to process everything and meet again the next day. Before Hee-won can respond, he informs her that her friends are waiting outside and abruptly leaves. Outside, Miran and Min-wook await Hee-won in their car. They receive a call from Hee-won, informing them she's visiting her mom and will head home afterward. Knowing about Hee-won's strained relationship with her mother, Min-wook offers to pick her up. But Miran quickly interjects, reminding Min-wook that his focus should be on her, his girlfriend, not Hee-won. Min-wook tries to explain that his concern for Hee-won stems from their long-standing friendship, even before he started dating Miran. But Miran remains unconvinced. On reaching her mother's place, Hee-won is met with a frosty reception. Rather than asking about her well-being, her mother questions her sudden visit. Hee-won deflects the question but internally wishes her mother had shown more concern. She attempts to break the icy silence by asking about her father, but her mother offers no response. Hee-won throws a curveball, asking if her mom still harbors resentment for her dad. She then starts to chat about her half-sibling, but her mom quickly shuts it down. "Why are you talking about her like she's family?" she snaps, warning Hee-won not to equate herself with another woman's daughter. It's clear that Hee-won's step-siblings aren't her mother's favorites. An outsider might mistake their conversation as a sign of a loving relationship. But the reality is far from it. Hee-won's mom has always been distant and unaffectionate. Hee-won ponders her reason for visiting. Perhaps she was seeking advice about her unplanned pregnancy. But she already knows her mom's stance on unwanted pregnancies. She'll likely tell her to terminate it. With this in mind, Hee-won switches gears, asking her mom about her feelings towards her dad and whether they ever loved each other. Her mom senses Hee-won is holding back something and prods her to spill it. Hee-won finally confesses her fears. Does her mom hate her because she hates her dad? Is she blamed for ruining her mom's life? Surprisingly, her mom admits that accepting an unwanted pregnancy isn't easy, but insists she provided everything Hee-won needed. This brings Hee-won to tears. She accuses her mom of never showing love and apologizes for the unexpected visit. As she heads for the door, her mom calls after her, asking if she's okay. But Hee-won leaves without a word. The next day, we see Do-jun at work, lunch in hand. His colleague notices his distracted demeanor and asks what's up. Do-jun drops a bombshell: he's getting married. He wants a May wedding and asks his friend to clear his schedule. His friend thinks he's joking until Do-jun asks for help finding a new home suitable for raising a child and booking a wedding venue. Realizing Do-jun is serious, his friend asks questions. Did he go on a blind date? Is the bride-to-be from a wealthy family? But all his inquiries are met with negative responses, leaving him stumped. Next, his friend asks if the bride-to-be is the hot new model they just signed. After all, she did ask to meet Do-jun personally. But Do-jun shakes his head. Nope, not her. This answer leaves his buddy scratching his head in confusion. To add to the surprise, Do-jun casually mentions he needs to visit Daehan High School tomorrow to meet the mother of his child. His friend's jaw drops. Wait, you're gonna be a dad? Do-jun apologizes for springing the news so suddenly and explains that the mother is a teacher at the school. Switching scenes, we find Hee-won at work. Mentally worn out from all the thinking she's been doing. So deep in thought she doesn't even hear her boss calling her until her colleague nudges her. Her boss isn't pleased, criticizing her lack of attention during a brief 20-minute staff meeting. He even questions how she plans to teach if she can't stay focused for such a short span. The meeting ends with the introduction of a new student teacher who'll be assisting Hee-won. As she's processing this news, her colleague spots her doodling Do-jul 2 lines on her notepad. The colleague teases her, saying it sounds like a name she knows. Hee-won dismisses it, saying she just remembered to include 2 lines in her teaching notes. But her boss isn't amused by the chatter and chides her again for talking during the meeting. He wraps up by announcing a staff dinner that evening and expects everyone to attend. After the meeting, the new student teacher, Jihun Lee, approaches Hee-won. He's a looker, and Hee-won's female colleague can't help but swoon. As they walk back together, Jihun mentions how much he missed Hee-won and teases her for not appearing thrilled to see him. She quickly sets boundaries, asking him to address her formally at work and be careful around the students, especially the girls. Jihun just laughs it off, saying she's still the same jealous Hee-won from their college days. We learn that Hee-won and Jihun go way back. They met during their third year of college when Jihun, a first year, was already a campus heartthrob. With both parents in education, a second-place class ranking, and his good looks, he was always the center of attention. Everyone noticed him, except Hee-won. They were both in liberal arts class. Hee-won once lent Jihun a pen. To show his gratitude, Jihun returned the favor by treating Hee-won to lunch. It was a simple gesture, nothing more, and after that lunch, Jihun vanished from lectures, fading like a forgotten dream. However, Jihun had an uncanny habit of using Hee-won's name as a get-out-of-jail-free card to escape clingy girlfriends. Bewildered and annoyed, Hee-won confronted him, demanding an explanation. With a smirk, Jihun confessed that he found Hee-won unshakable and hence, the perfect scapegoat. He justified his actions, claiming it was exhausting fending off love-struck women who mistook his kindness for interest. When he insinuated she was jealous, Hee-won's fuse blew. Miran, joining the fray, landed a punch on Jihun's face. That day, on the campus green, Jihun was schooled by two fierce ladies. The incident fizzled out, without further ado. Jihun was soon drafted into the army, and Hee-won graduated, thinking she'd seen the last of him. Fast forward to present day, they're standing in front of her class as she introduces Jihun as their new student teacher. After instructing her student, Se-hyun, to meet her post-lunch, she advises Jihun to explore the school or prep for his class during her free period. Lost in thought, Hee-won's mind drifts to her recent conversation with Do-jun Kong. She's amusingly reminded of his insistence on his full name, which oddly rhymes with Do-jul. Suddenly, she spots a man resembling Do-jun. On closer inspection, she realizes it's him. Shocked, she swiftly grabs his hand, dragging him to a secluded corner. She demands to know why he's at her school. To which he calmly replies that they had plans to meet. He asks her to release his hand and advises her to refrain from her impromptu sprints. She proposes they reconvene after her work, but he insists on a quick chat due to time constraints. Then, out of the blue, he pops the suggestion, "Let's get married." This revelation leaves Hee-won reeling. They barely know each other aside from that single, shared night. As she proposes a more in-depth conversation later, she hears the principal nearby, looking for her and Do-jun Kong. Thinking fast, she clings to Do-jun, pretending she nearly had a tumble and he saved her from falling. She plays it off like she's directing him elsewhere. When the principal asks Do-jun for confirmation, he backs her up, saying he has no intention of going anywhere else. This makes Hee-won question if they'd crossed paths before. In a surprising turn of events, he sends the principal ahead, asking for a private word with Hee-won. Suddenly, she feels woozy, realizing he's the school's chairman. Is she about to be fired? And why is he talking about taking responsibility and proposing marriage? Is he assuming she's after his money because of the baby? Despite the confusion, she knows something isn't adding up. All she can think of is getting back to prep for her next class. But Do-jun isn't done talking. Misunderstanding his intentions, she tells him she plans to resign before the first period ends, ensuring she'll never cross paths with him again. She asserts her intentions of raising Do-jul, a nickname for the baby meaning 2 lines, by herself. Leaving a puzzled Do-jun behind, she strides off, leaving him trying to make sense of what just transpired. As Do-jun saunters back to his workspace, his secretary gives him a quizzical look. After all, tonight's meeting has been in the diary for over a week, and it's his job to keep schedules running like clockwork. However, Do-jun explains, with a hint of mischief in his eyes, that the principal's heartfelt plea was too persuasive to resist. Now, the secretary is left with the tricky task of canceling a week-old dinner appointment at the drop of a hat. With a chuckle, Do-jun teases his secretary, claiming he's the second-best smooth talker in the country. He's confident in his secretary's ability to work this out. The secretary retorts, suggesting Do-jun, the supposed number one persuader, handle the dinner cancellation himself. After all, Do-jun's usually so rigid that he wouldn't even take a bathroom break if it wasn't in his schedule. So, what's brought about this sudden change? Their banter is interrupted when Do-jun spots Hee-won. He curiously asks his secretary if Do-jun sounds like Do-jul. The secretary, puzzled by the question, gets a vague response and a reminder about the dinner rescheduling. Still, he can't help but mention the awkwardness between the chairman and Hee-won, hinting at a one-sided marriage proposal. Do-jun brushes it off, attributing it to Hee-won's shyness. Later, in the office, Hee-won and Se-hyun share a heart-to-heart. Hee-won probes about any unusual behaviors from her uncle the previous day. Se-hyun assures her that her uncle is a meticulous planner and not prone to spontaneous actions. This leaves Hee-won pondering if their night together was part of his plan. In a surprising turn, Se-hyun reveals that her sibling's birth mother isn't her own. She also spills the beans about Do-jun's age, he's 34. Hee-won is relieved to finally have a piece of the puzzle. After sharing her family's secrets, Se-hyun proposes they swap secrets. The young girl seems glad to have someone to confide in and assures Hee-won she won't judge. Touched by her maturity, Hee-won thanks her and wonders if this level-headedness runs in the family. Despite her pregnancy-induced exhaustion, she's left marveling at Se-hyun's poise. As Se-hyun exits the office, she's startled by a friend who practically yanks her outside. Hollering about big news. It turns out, high school heartthrobs Tae-woo and Ki-young are set to face off in a one-on-one basketball game. Se-hyun shrugs, unimpressed until her friend mentions that this isn't just any game. The two boys had a spat over a girl. Now, that's some classic teenage drama. Curious, Se-hyun probes for more details. Apparently, Ki-young was talking about some girl like she was his personal possession when Tae-woo stepped in. Given Tae-woo's laid-back nature and distaste for violence, he proposed settling the matter on the basketball court instead of a brawl. As for the girl in question, Se-hyun's friend brushes it off, more interested in the showdown than the damsel in this drama. Her friend, smitten with Tae-woo, considers Se-hyun lucky to have him as a neighbor. But Se-hyun sees it differently. To her, Tae-woo is far from the charming boy everyone else sees. She knows his lazy, manipulative side and his cunning ability to exploit others' weaknesses. Even her own father didn't believe her when she complained about him. Yet, she sees a silver lining in this situation. If Tae-woo gets a girlfriend, maybe she'll finally be free of him, a thought that makes her shout freedom, startling her friend. The game begins, and Tae-woo casually tosses his jacket on Se-hyun's head, earning approving whispers from the crowd. However, she overhears some students speculating she's the cause of the guy's feud. Annoyed, she hands the jacket to her friend and leaves without explanation. Walking away, she believes Tae-woo only interfered because she was the subject of the dispute. She anticipates rumors and misunderstandings, considering her plan to speed things up by finding him a girlfriend herself. Meanwhile, the new student teacher approaches the crowd, sitting next to Se-hyun's friend. He introduces himself, and she recognizes him. He thanks her and asks for her name. Upon hearing Raniku, he compliments her, leaving her starstruck. However, his real motive is to learn more about Se-hyun and Hee-won's conversation. Even if he doesn't get any info, he figures it can't hurt to make a new friend. This leaves us wondering, just what kind of teacher is he, really? Later that day, the teachers roll into an expensive restaurant for a dinner hosted by the principal. Their eyes widen at the sight of the fancy place, and they can't help but assume the chairman must have footed the bill. As they settle in, Jihun asks Hee-won if he can snag the seat next to her. But she playfully shoos him away, suggesting he finds another spot. Luckily, another colleague steps in and saves the day, allowing him to sit. Just as they're getting comfortable, the chairman strolls in, causing a ripple of excitement through the room. Hee-won nearly chokes on her drink, her surprise plain on her face. Even Jihun, who's been observing her, checks if she's okay. The principal kicks off the dinner with a surprise announcement. Instead of his usual lengthy speech, they've invited the chairman to say a few words. His speech is short and sweet, leaving everyone relieved that they didn't have to endure the principal's usual rambling. Throughout dinner, Hee-won and Do-jun barely touch their food. Do-jun keeps glancing towards the entrance and asks questions about Jihun, the new teacher. On learning that he's a student teacher from Myung-won University, the chairman wonders if Hee-won has a thing for younger guys. Jihun is summoned to the chairman's table. After some small talk about college life, the chairman starts grilling him with intense questions. He then pours Jihun a drink, giving him an icy stare that leaves Jihun wondering if he stepped on a landmine. Meanwhile, Hee-won finishes her meal and prepares to leave. But not before sharing some juicy gossip about Jihun with a colleague who seems smitten by him. She reveals that Jihun prefers motels to trips and has a wild side. Her colleague bursts into laughter, claiming she wouldn't mind if Jihun were a wolf. Hee-won tries to convince her about Jihun's lack of principles, but her warnings fall on deaf ears. Chuckling, Hee-won waves goodbye and heads out. Outside, the spring chill catches Hee-won off guard. As she's shivering, the Do-jun sneaks up on her, asking if she's heading home. She jumps, startled, but quickly composes herself and confirms. He offers her a ride, which she politely declines. He then drapes his jacket over her shoulders, causing her to jump again. He teases her about her skittishness, and she counters that he keeps surprising her. With a laugh, he insists she keeps the jacket since she looks cold. So he asks her what she was doing there, and she explains that she didn't know where to go because she got lost. However, he mentions that he has an excellent sense of direction and he's great at finding paths. He adds that he's so skilled that he can make paths where there weren't any previously. As they stand there, he nudges her towards his car, hinting that it's warmer there. Just when she's about to refuse, he leans in and confesses that he wouldn't have braved the cold if it wasn't for her. Smooth operator, isn't he? Their chit-chat continues as Do-jun suggests again that they move the conversation to his car. Once inside the car, he teases her, asking if she at least knows her address, despite her lousy navigation skills. Then he drops the big question, has she considered his morning marriage proposal? Her answer is as swift as it is firm, nope, not marrying you, Mr. Chairman. And there he goes again, insisting on his name. Hee-won, puzzled, asks if his name holds that much importance for him. He responds, clarifying that he's just reminding her since she called him Do-jul earlier. She quickly corrects him, stating Do-jul is the baby's nickname. This sparks a debate. He argues he should have been part of the nickname decision since half the baby is his. But Hee-won denies the baby is his. The argument heats up, leading him to pull over and challenge her to prove he's not the father. Plus, he's not happy with Do-jul out of all the cute nicknames available, why that one? They bicker until he finally accepts the nickname, mainly because Hee-won slips and refers to the baby as their baby. She quickly backtracks, not wanting to burden him with fatherhood. He's hurt and insists on the marriage proposal again, but she keeps declining. He asks her for a solid reason for her refusal. And she says they don't know each other well enough. He disagrees, listing all the things he knows about her, including some intimate details that make her cringe. She pleads with him to skip the steamy parts, arguing they don't know each other well enough for marriage. But he thinks they can learn, especially since they seem to gel quite well on certain topics. She counters, saying a family should be built on love, not lust. To her surprise, he suggests they start loving each other now. Do-jun then floats the idea of a first date since they already had a sleepover together, and he's popped the question. But Hee-won is not so easily swayed. Do-jun then dives into his spiel about wanting a complete family for their baby, Do-jul. He wants the kid to experience love from both parents and thinks marriage is the way to go. Hee-won, though, insists on marrying for love, not convenience. So Do-jun suggests they start dating to see if love blossoms. This time, Hee-won agrees, with a stern caveat: agreeing to a date does not equate to accepting his proposal. As she leaves, she notes to herself that Do-jun seems like a guy who always gets what he wants. When Hee-won arrives home, she finds her friend Miran in a tiff with Min-wook. After scolding Miran for leaving poor Min-wook out in the cold, Miran pulls her aside to drop a bombshell: she's figured out who the father of Hee-won's baby is. The chairman of Hee-won's school and VP of the Daehan group, no less. But Hee-won seems unfazed. She knew already. In the process of spilling the beans, Miran also accidentally reveals a secret outing she'd kept from Min-wook. This sparks a rift between the couple, and Min-wook asks Miran for a private chat. Once alone, he opens up about his relationship with Hee-won, explaining how they grew up together and how she's like a sister to him. He assures Miran that he'll change his protective habits towards Hee-won if they're hurting her. But Miran is left scratching her head, wondering why Min-wook is suddenly sharing all this. He reveals that her silent treatment has been affecting his work and that he's been waiting outside all day to talk to her. After unloading, he asks if she's done being mad and proposes to show her something. He stands up, announcing he's going to kiss her. Miran is taken aback, reminding him that Hee-won is in the next room. But Min-wook isn't deterred. It's just a kiss, after all. But one thing leads to another, and they emerge from the room looking rather disheveled. The next day, Hee-won and Do-jun are off on their date, with Miran and Min-wook tailing them in full spy mode. Do-jun, ever the gentleman, had invited her friends, but Hee-won told him they're a bit odd. And boy, she wasn't kidding. After a thorough grilling about Do-jun from Miran and Min-wook, they've taken it upon themselves to investigate the potential couple. Meanwhile, Hee-won can't help but notice Do-jun's transformation. Gone is the corporate tycoon look, and in its place is a more relaxed, casual vibe. She's surprised, but finds it refreshing and, dare she say, attractive. In the midst of their chat, Do-jun casually asks about her age. She's 27, she replies. As he's about to share his, she playfully interrupts, revealing she already knows, thanks to Se-hyun's little chit-chat. This prompts Do-jun to tease her about doing her own investigation. But she assures him it was all part of a conversation about Se-hyun's family. And oh, by the way, he's 4 years younger than Se-hyun's dad. As they continue their stroll, Do-jun decides to drop the formalities. He wants to call her Hee-won instead of the usual stiff Ms. Jang. She's taken aback but gives him a go-ahead with a hint of hesitation. He then nudges her to follow suit, suggesting she calls him Appa instead of Mr. Kong. She playfully counters, opting for Do-jun. Suddenly, Do-jun veers towards Miran and Min-wook's not-so-secret hiding spot. He greets them cheerfully, inviting them to join the movie date. They quickly agree, making it a double date of sorts. Once inside the theater, Hee-won notices it's just them. She asks if Do-jun bought all the tickets, but he shrugs it off, explaining he just requested an empty theater. It dawns on her that he's the VP of the Daehan group, which owns the theater chain. Oh, the perks of being rich. He checks if she's comfy and if there's a movie she'd like to see. Before she can answer, Min-wook jumps in, listing her preferences. He suggests to Do-jun that such details matter in a relationship. But Miran pulls him back, reminding him that Hee-won can handle herself. Soon, a waiter pops in to check if they need anything else. Do-jun orders mango juice, cheese popcorn, and the most popular movie. What a guy. As the flick rolls on, Hee-won's eyes light up. This is the movie she's been dying to watch. But things take a turn when a brutal scene unfolds. Do-jun Kong, in a flash, covers her eyes, babbling about how this film is too harsh for their unborn kiddo. He's protective, sure. But it's getting on her nerves. Just as she's about to protest, he leans in close, so close they could kiss. But they don't. They pull back, leaving an awkward silence hanging in the air. This moment triggers a memory in Hee-won, a memory of a night when Do-jun Kong was more than just a friend. The end credits roll and Min-wook receives a message. The logo he's been meticulously crafting is ready for review. He invites Miran to lend her discerning eye, as he values her artistic input. This leaves Hee-won and Do-jun alone, and sensing an opportune moment, Do-jun suggests they decamp to a nearby cafe. Over coffee, Do-jun inquires about Hee-won's thoughts on the film. She admits feeling saddened by the protagonist's inability to conquer the mountain, a sentiment that prompts a light-hearted proposition from Do-jun. In a quirky move, Do-jun offers to be her hero, even asking what he'd need to do to earn that title. She laughs it off, pleading for him to stop teasing her. Then, out of the blue, he drops a bombshell. He wants to know if she has feelings for their friend, Min-wook. Her silence tells him all he needs to know. She's got a thing for Min-wook. But before she can spill her heart out, Do-jun cuts her off. He insists it doesn't matter who she's crushing on. They've got bigger fish to fry, like being responsible adults and creating a happy nest for their little bun in the oven, Do-jul. Do-jun then lays down the law. They've got to see each other 4 times a week, juggling their schedules as needed. She nods in agreement, but inside, she's thinking, he's asking questions, but he's already decided the answers. Where's my say in all this? Plus, this new Do-jun seems different. It makes her wonder who the real him is. Lost in her thoughts, she snapped back to reality when Do-jun drops another bombshell. He wants to know if she slept with him to get back at Min-wook. He adds that while they're together, he's going to give it his all and expects the same from her. No more drama with Min-wook. She assures him that she is already working on moving past her feelings for Min-wook. So, he doesn't need to worry about any love triangle shenanigans. 2 weeks and 6 dates later, Hee-won finds herself soaking up the weather outdoors. Her rendezvous with Do-jun has been a pleasant mix of dinner dates and leisurely drives. He's been nothing short of a gentleman, thoughtful and considerate at every turn. But something gnaws at her. Their relationship seems stalled. It doesn't feel like they're making headway. If they were just any other couple, it would be different. But their dates feel more like business meetings than romantic outings. There are no spontaneous texts or cutesy emojis. No, I miss you messages. Adding to her unease is the stark difference in their financial statuses. She's finding it hard to adjust to his wealth. Marriage? She's not sure if she could ever seriously consider it. Lost in thought, she's interrupted by Se-hyun, who wonders why she's outside instead of in class. As they chat, a man strolls by with a ball. Se-hyun teases that the gym teacher has a crush on her. But Hee-won quickly shuts down the gossip, reminding her it's not cool to spread rumors without knowing the facts. She then reminds her that she had promised to share her problems, but never did. Could it be a trust issue? Se-hyun quickly reassures her that trust isn't the problem. She brings up Tae-woo Jang, a third-year student. Hee-won knows him alright, as the one who has the hots for Se-hyun. Se-hyun looks taken aback. Who spilled the beans? Hee-won shrugs, saying she just put 2 and 2 together from seeing them biking to and from school together. Now, it's Se-hyun's turn to play the rumor police. She clarifies that she bought a bike to enjoy some solitude, but Tae-woo decided to get one too. She then asks Hee-won for advice on how to shake someone off. Is she talking about Tae-woo? Se-hyun seems thrilled that Hee-won is the first one to ever insinuate that Tae-woo could be a bother, even if unintentionally. This gives Se-hyun hope and determination, although Hee-won seems a bit puzzled by her reaction. Their heart-to-heart is interrupted by Jihun. He tells Hee-won it's time to prepare for class, and Se-hyun excuses herself. When Jihun addresses Hee-won as Sunbae instead of him as Jang, she warns him not to address her at all and walks off. Jihun quips that she's leaving him with limited options and wonders how long she can keep up her feisty attitude. Meanwhile, Do-jun Kong is at his desk, but his mind is elsewhere, specifically on Hee-won. He recalls the first day he laid eyes on her, a day when everything seemed to magically align. His last meeting wrapped up half an hour early, giving him an unexpected window of free time. He contemplated grabbing a drink, open to the possibility of company but equally content with solitude. That night, he felt spontaneous and unshackled. Enter Hee-won with her proposal. He had no choice but to lend an ear. His initial impression of her was audacious and bold. Her audacity left him so flabbergasted that he lost his chance to decline, surrendering instead to curiosity about her plans. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, stretching over an hour. She wasn't coy, instead exuding intelligence and warmth. Bold yet shy, her sparkling eyes hanging on to his every word made him feel cherished. When he finally heard her proposal, he found himself intrigued rather than repelled. Looking back, he can't help but wonder if their encounter was part of a larger, unseen plan. He genuinely felt a connection, both physically and emotionally. Quite the unforgettable meet-cute, wouldn't you say? But then, his secretary snaps him out of his thoughts, nudging him back to the grind. Unexpectedly, he throws her a curveball. Am I unlikable? Caught off guard yet armed with a litany of responses, she begins to list off his less appealing qualities, only to be cut short by Do-jun. That wasn't what he meant. She probes further, asking if he's unlikable as a man. The secretary notes his unusual behavior and asks if something's awry. Do-jun mirrors her question, wondering aloud what might be wrong with him. He likens himself to an umbrella after the rain, once useful, now merely a hindrance. His secretary, connecting the dots, asks if Hee-won has called him useless or in the way. But he quickly clarifies that those weren't her exact words. He then asks his secretary if he appears old to her, sparking speculation that Hee-won might have made such a remark. The conversation veers towards whether Hee-won genuinely likes the chairman and if he's tried to win her over with gifts. After all, using his wealth to pique her interest seems like an easy solution. Do-jun shares that he's tried to surprise her with some items he's noticed her eyeing. But each attempt was met with discomfort. His wealth could buy anything she wants, but material possessions don't seem to sway her. So, he pondered over how he could accumulate some points in her book. He even sought advice from his niece Se-hyun on Hee-won's preferences. And the answer? Spicy rice cakes. The secretary can't help but express a tinge of "I told you so," reminding her boss that he'd once advised him to date more and work less. The idea of gifting spicy rice cakes in a relationship was a definite faux pas in his book. But before the secretary can add anything more, Do-jun springs to his feet with a surprising announcement. He's off to get some spicy rice cakes, meeting be damned. After all, he has an adept secretary whom he trusts implicitly to juggle his schedule. So, Do-jun drives straight to the school, hoping to catch a glimpse of Hee-won. And there she is, but this time, she's with another man. The story then takes us back to before Do-jun's arrival. We see Hee-won wrapping up a call with him, setting up yet another meeting. Once done, she heads back to her office. As she walks in, she hears the principal berating one of her students. She observes that he seems particularly harsh on her homeroom kids. Could it be a hangover from last year's incident? She ponders. Jihun steps in to defend the student under fire, but the principal quickly rebuffs him, reminding him of his role as a student teacher. The principal further implies that such mishaps are expected from Miss Hee-won Jang's class. On hearing this, Hee-won confronts the principal, defending her student's actions as harmless and devoid of malice. However, she promises to sternly warn the student, Rani-ku, against doodling on quiz papers in the future. After making Rani apologize once more and instructing her to come see her later, Hee-won also offers an apology, assuring the principal that such an incident won't reoccur. The principal scoffs at the idea of a mere apology being sufficient and then goes on to criticize the arrogance he perceives in both students and teachers. This remark riles up Hee-won, who calls him out for his blatant disrespect and accuses him of holding a grudge over a past incident. Another teacher intervenes to defuse the escalating tension. As the principal storms off, he grumbles about his 20-year teaching career, expressing disbelief at being spoken to in such a manner. As Hee-won exits the school, the teacher who had stepped in earlier approaches her. Grateful. She thanks him for his intervention, but he brushes it off, even apologizing for siding with the principal, just to keep the peace. Out of the blue, he asks if she's dating anyone and suggests they grab dinner if she's single. He also mentions that the gym teacher seems to have a soft spot for her. To nip the conversation in the bud, she quickly says she's already seeing someone, though she still appreciates his invitation. Just as she continues her stroll, she hears Do-jun calling her name from afar, causing her heart to skip a beat. His tone hints at an undercurrent of jealousy. Mr. Shin, the other teacher, sees Chairman Do-jun calling out to Hee-won and starts wondering if he's the mystery man she's dating. Before he can get an answer, Hee-won takes off in a flash towards Do-jun. Surprisingly, Do-jun also breaks into a run to meet her halfway, leaving her puzzled as she was already heading his way. Upon reaching her, Do-jun wraps his arms around her, chastising her for running while pregnant. This unexpected display leaves bystanders whispering and speculating about a possible movie shoot. Overwhelmed, Hee-won pleads with him to let go due to the growing audience. Once they're safely in the car, she quizzes him on why he'd call out and wave, given his well-known status at school. He admits that the thought hadn't crossed his mind until she brought it up. The conversation then veers to a magazine article praising his sharp intellect, prompting him to tease her about still reading up on him. He also curiously asks about Mr. Shin, the teacher he saw her with earlier. Hee-won explains that Mr. Shin had assisted her with something and had casually asked about her relationship status. She reassures Do-jun that she informed him that she was seeing someone. A seemingly jealous Do-jun, however, can't help but wonder why Mr. Shin would be interested in her love life. But Hee-won dismisses his concern, stating that she can't possibly know Mr. Shin's motives. Do-jun then asks Hee-won to remain committed to him until she makes her final decision, which she assures him she has by declaring she's seeing someone. As they drive off, she inquires about their destination. With a smirk, Do-jun reveals they're off to have spicy rice cakes. Later, Se-hyun and her buddy Ranku are ambling out of school when Se-hyun questions her friend about the math test stunt. Was she trying to ruffle the teacher's feathers? Ranku shrugs it off, not realizing the principal lacked a sense of humor. As they saunter on, they notice the buzz among the students. The gossip mill is spinning about Ms. Hee-won Jang spotted in a cozy embrace with an unidentified guy. Eager for some gossip, they eavesdrop to gather more juicy details about their homeroom teacher. Just then, Jihun walks by, nudging the students to head home. Spotting him, Ranku quickly drags her friend towards him. She thanks him for his attempt to help in the teacher's office, despite his limited influence. Trying to lift their spirits, he suggests treating them to some spicy rice cakes before they part ways. Se-hyun politely declines, but just as Ranku tries to persuade her to accept, she remembers she left the test papers behind. With a quick wave, she dashes back to retrieve them, leaving Se-hyun alone with the teacher. An awkward who-sh hangs in the air as Jihun and Se-hyun find themselves standing together. Breaking the silence, Jihun observes that Se-hyun seems pretty tight with Ms. Hee-won Jang. Se-hyun shoots back, noting he also appears close to her. This prompts Jihun to admit their shared history as college buddies. He attempts to dig a little deeper, deciding he won't push too hard but will just toss out a few conversational hooks to see if she bites. His casual comments skillfully suggest his insight into Hee-won's life, and Se-hyun, unsuspecting, takes the bait. She reveals that she bumped into her homeroom teacher at the OBGYN, then cheekily asks if he's dating Hee-won. Jihun denies it but can't help his curiosity when Se-hyun hints at Hee-won's pregnancy. She then asks if he knows who Hee-won is currently seeing, and he cleverly keeps up his act of being in the know about Hee-won. Based on what he's heard, he begins to piece together the puzzle, suspecting that Hee-won might be expecting. As they stand there, lost in thought, Ranku dashes back to them. Se-hyun quickly begs Jihun to keep their conversation a secret from Ranku. fearing the news will spread like wildfire if she gets wind of it. Their destination for spicy rice cakes turns out to be closed, much to Hayen's disappointment. Undeterred, they decide to find another spot to satisfy their craving. Meanwhile, Hee-won and Do-jun find themselves in another restaurant, where Do-jun, ever the gentleman, has ordered a smorgasbord of dishes to give Hee-won a variety of choices. She wonders aloud about their ability to finish all the food and questions the absence of other patrons, suspecting he might have rented out the entire place again. He confirms her suspicion, causing her to inwardly cringe at his extravagance. She can't help but wonder how he knew about her fondness for spicy rice cakes, but she doesn't let that stop her from digging in. As he watches her eat, he suggests that if something is bothering her, she should voice it. Her response is a question: what's there to complain about when dining in a privately rented restaurant? But he senses her unease, comparing her chopstick use to stabbing him, and encourages her to share her thoughts. Finally, she admits, only because he insists, that his habit of renting out entire places makes her uncomfortable. It's not necessary to flaunt his wealth to the point of inconveniencing others, especially since this is a popular spot for her students. How sad would they be if they couldn't get their favorite food here? Do-jun explains that he wanted to treat her to the best spicy rice cakes, which are said to be from this very restaurant. As he speaks, she can't help but feel her heart flutter. Maybe he's a better person than she initially thought. He finishes by saying that if she doesn't like such gestures, she should make a decision so they can meet more freely. However, she interprets this as Do-jun wanting to create a happy family for Do-jul, which inherently involves marriage. All the while, he simply watches her as she enjoys her meal. Following their dinner, Hee-won insists on boxing up the untouched dishes. The aroma of spicy cuisine fills the car, a testament to their extravagant meal. She playfully chides Do-jun for his wastefulness, dashing his hopes of impressing her with his generosity. Yet, there's an undeniable charm in watching her stubbornly eat the rice cakes. Instead of heading home, Do-jun takes a detour. Usually, Hee-won doesn't question their destination, but today, she's unusually quiet, lost in thought. They drive in companionable silence to a cafe offering a stunning night view. Despite the month that has passed since their first meeting, Do-jun vividly recalls the electric sensation of Hee-won's touch and the softness of her lips. Each time he sees her, a wave of longing washes over him. It's a feeling he struggles to understand. As if he were a love-struck teenager again. When he proposed to her after discovering Do-jul's existence, he believed it was out of responsibility. Now, he finds himself questioning his motives. Does he want to marry her because of their child, or is it because he yearns for her companionship? This is the first time he's fallen so deeply for someone. And also the first time he's faced such a rejection. As they cruise back in the car, Do-jun notices Hee-won nodding off. She looks a bit uncomfortable, so he decides to adjust her seat for a more relaxed position. This brings him closer to her, and as he does, she stirs and opens her eyes. Seizing the moment, he asks if he can kiss her, playfully adding that silence at the count of 3 will be taken as consent. Before she can utter a word, he leans in for the kiss. Their intimate moment is abruptly interrupted by a ringing phone. Hee-won suggests he answer it, unaware that it's her phone that's buzzing. Given the persistence of the caller, it seems like an important call. Do-jun, however, tells her that if she doesn't mind ignoring it, he's more than happy to resume their interrupted kiss. But she swiftly picks up the phone, only to find out it's her dad on the other end. As she delves into a family conversation, Do-jun sits patiently, respecting her privacy and waiting for her to finish. We learn that when Hee-won was just a little girl of 6, her dad introduced her to a stranger and announced he'd be marrying her. She can't quite remember her feelings from that moment, but she recalls hoping that her dad's happiness would mean more visits from him. She thought she had a role in his joy, not realizing her feelings were inconsequential to him. Hidden from her young eyes, the stranger was already expecting her half-sibling. Her dad was already shifting his focus, ready to shower his new family with all the love he had, just as her mom had once said he could. But her dad's frequent visits remained a dream. With time, she simply accepted her dad's new marriage as an inevitable part of life. Their phone conversation drifts on for a bit before she finally hangs up. Do-jun, curious, asks who had called. When she tells him, he further inquires if her parents live far away. It's then she reveals her parents divorced when she was only 4 years old. Hee-won opens up a bit more, explaining how her mom lived alone after the divorce, while her dad is about to tie the knot for the 3rd time. She also mentions her 2 half-sisters, with the youngest currently out of their dad's reach. So, she decides to step in, setting up a meeting with her. As she steps out of Do-jun's car, he quickly follows, curious if she'd introduce him to her sister. He takes a moment to study her. Noticing her lips are slightly swollen. He comments that had he known the call would upset her, he would have urged her not to answer. This catches her off guard. She hadn't told him she was sad, nor did she show it. Her story was shared in a neutral tone. It makes her wonder about Do-jun. How could he know her feelings even before she did? Back home, Hee-won offers her sister some of the food they brought back. However, her sister seems more interested in Do-jun's business card. She's thrilled at the thought of having met the vice president of the Daehan group, and excitedly speculates he might become their hyungbu, a term for an older sister's husband. Despite Hee-won's protests, Ji-won insists that Do-jun seemed to enjoy the title. When Ji-won reveals she has a day off from school, she proposes visiting Hyungbu at his office for lunch. Hee-won isn't thrilled with the idea, but Ji-won insists Do-jun had given her an open invitation to visit anytime. The business card, according to her, is her golden ticket. Protective as ever, Hee-won warns her against such a visit. Their conversation shifts to Ji-won's recent argument with their dad, with Hee-won probing if it's related to their dad's impending marriage. Ji-won then shares her feelings of betrayal by their dad. Even though she understands he has his own life, she can't help but remember how heartbroken he was when their mom passed away. She vividly recalls the dinner where he introduced them to his new love interest, and how he showered her with affection. Watching him fuss over this woman, Ji-won couldn't help but feel hurt. It had only been 2 years since their mom's passing. Yet it seemed their dad's affections had shifted so swiftly. They delve deeper into their family matters, sharing feelings and thoughts. The conversation takes a pause when Ji-won gets back to the food Hee-won brought. She then asks Hee-won if she thinks her boyfriend will make it to their dad's wedding the next day. Hee-won, however, replies that he's a pretty busy man. The wedding day is here, and Do-jun makes his entrance. As he raises his hand to wave at Hee-won, she dashes towards him, pulling his hand down, insisting they need to chat. As they navigate towards a quieter corner, they bump into Hee-won's aunt, who is intrigued by the handsome man accompanying Hee-won. Before Hee-won can conjure up a response, Do-jun introduces himself as her boyfriend. This revelation prompts the aunt to whisk them away, proudly introducing Do-jun to everyone as Hee-won's future husband. The introductions happen in a whirlwind, and despite Hee-won's attempts to steal a moment with Do-jun, her aunt persists in implying a deeper relationship between them. She even hints at an impending wedding, to which Do-jun playfully promises some good news soon. It's clear that the aunt is thrilled about the idea of her niece having a boyfriend. When Hee-won finally manages to pull Do-jun aside, she questions his apparent deviation from his usual adherence to schedules and plans. But Do-jun shifts the focus to her, asking if she's been eating well as she seems to have lost weight, and if she's experiencing morning sickness. Back to her question, he admits that it seems like his routine and plans only falter when it comes to her. Wrapping his jacket around her, he promises to ponder why he's unable to stick to his plans when it comes to her and why it doesn't seem to bother him in the least. Next day, Tae-woo and Southeast Hyun hit the road to school, pedaling their bikes. "Speed up, Se-hyun, or we'll be tardy," Tae-woo nudges. She retorts, reminding him of her faux leg pain and the fact that she suggested he ride alone. He pulls up, questioning if she despises his company so much she'd sabotage her bike and fake an injury. Se-hyun realizes he saw through her charade but still gifted her a new bike an early birthday present. His peculiar ways left her thinking he was just messing with her. How bad does it hurt? He inquires about her leg, which she disregards, shifting the topic to his popularity instead. Unfazed, he insists on taking her to his mom's clinic post-school. She tries to divert again, probing about his romantic preferences. She offers to play matchmaker, but he chuckles it off, describing his dream girl as a petite, short-haired beauty with big brown eyes, who looks adorable even when sulking. Se-hyun deduces there's someone he's interested in and pushes him to spill the beans. Suddenly, Ronnie comes sprinting towards them, calling out for Se-hyun but halts at the sight of Tae-woo, greeting him sweetly. Tae-woo returns the greeting and leaves the two friends. Once he's gone, Ronnie fawns over him, making Se-hyun question her motives. Ronnie denies any ulterior motives, claiming she has some juicy gossip. Se-hyun is skeptical until Ronnie spills the beans about their homeroom teacher, Hee-won's pregnancy, which leaves Se-hyun flabbergasted. Ronnie keeps speculating about Hee-won's love life. Annoyed, Se-hyun demands to know how she learned about Hee-won's condition. Ronnie reveals she overheard the student-teacher discussing it. Se-hyun, alarmed, leaves her bike with Ronnie and rushes to school. There, she confronts Jihun, insisting on a conversation despite his upcoming staff meeting. She accuses him of leaking the news to Ronnie, despite her warning. He doesn't deny it but avoids explaining why, leaving for his meeting. As Se-hyun ponders over her next move, Hee-won approaches her with a smile, causing Se-hyun to break down and apologize. Later, Hee-won finds herself in the vice principal's office, facing questions about the circulating rumors. She apologizes but doesn't deny them. The vice principal emphasizes the need to control the rumor mill, fearing damage to the school's reputation and potential disciplinary actions for her. As she exits the office, another teacher snidely labels her disgraceful. Throughout the day, the whispers follow her, but she can't bring herself to deny the rumors as it would feel like denying Do-jun. She contemplates her impending resignation or possible firing and how to protect her unborn baby from this chaos. Overwhelmed, she feels faint, but Jihun catches her, asking if she's alright. Jihun casually suggests they blow off the last class and take a stroll instead. Hee-won, pulling her arm free, agrees, but on one condition: he sends Se-hyun to her office. She'd seen Se-hyun upset earlier that day and hadn't asked too many questions then. Now, however, she's pieced together that it's linked to the rumors. She blames herself for it, knowing Se-hyun isn't the type to fuel gossip. There must be more to it. Jihun taunts Hee-won, accusing her of pretending to be aloof and superior. He scoffs at her predicament, reminding her of how she embarrassed him in the past. Despite her calling him all sorts of names, at least he wasn't expecting a baby. Hee-won confronts him about the rumor, to which he confesses nonchalantly. He admits to making a call, but pins the blame on a loose-lipped student. When she questions his motives, he brings up their past in college. He accuses her of ruining his reputation, which resulted in him taking a break from school and being labeled a disappointment by his family. He smirks, admitting he would have sought revenge sooner if this opportunity hadn't presented itself so conveniently. As he walks away, he promises to dismiss the students. The next morning, Hee-won wakes up dreading the day ahead. Her pride as an educator has taken a hit and all she wants is to escape reality. As she gets ready for work, she contemplates Do-jun's proposal. Could they make it work as a family without love? She's devoted 3 years to teaching and takes pride in her job. She considers using Do-jun's influence to secure her position a little longer. However, the thought of exploiting Do-jun makes her feel guilty and she decides against it. She joins Jihun in front of the classroom, who questions her hesitation. She walks in, greets her students, and is about to start the lesson when a stylish woman struts in, introducing herself as Kyung-soo's mother. Hee-won tries to direct her to the staff room since class is in session, but the woman starts berating her publicly. Hee-won attempts to stand her ground but decides to step outside with the woman, leaving Jihun in charge, to avoid creating a scene in front of her students. Once in the hallway, Hee-won apologizes to the irate parent, but her apology falls on deaf ears. The woman criticizes her for failing to keep her personal life separate from her professional one and causing rumors to circulate among the students. Despite Hee-won's efforts to calm her down, the woman raises her voice, attracting attention from inside the classrooms. Se-hyun spots the commotion and immediately calls her uncle to come to Hee-won's aid. In a surprising twist, Kyung-soo's mom pulls Principal Park aside for a chat. She casually drops that her husband, the big-shot CEO, had been eager to check out the school, but she managed to hold him back. With a pointed look, she asks Park about his game plan for the ongoing drama. Before Park can delve into the rumor saga, she cuts him off. The how of the rumors doesn't interest her. Instead, she points to Hee-won, standing quietly nearby, suggesting they verify the truth of the rumors instead. Taken aback, Park turns to Hee-won, who remains silent, lost in thought about the vice principal's advice. She finally apologizes for the rumors and offers to resign if necessary. But she prefers taking a leave first, as losing their homeroom teacher suddenly could be hard on the students. When Kyung-soo's mom pushes her about the rumors, Hee-won counters, questioning the relevance of the rumors and urging them to focus on the situation at hand. Just when the situation heats up, Do-jun swings by. His arrival catches everyone off guard. He casually mentions hearing about a board meeting from Park and moves over to Hee-won, holding her hand. This unexpected gesture leaves Kyung-soo's mom and Park speechless. He whispers to Hee-won to play along and checks with his secretary about his schedule for the board meeting. His secretary reports he's booked until May. At this, Do-jun points out the difficulty in rescheduling, especially with their wedding planned in April. As jaws drop around the room, he explains that Hee-won kept their relationship a secret to avoid making others uncomfortable and impacting her work life. Park quickly assures that they'd love to have Hee-won stay on staff. Do-jun then expresses concern over the rumor-induced stress on Hee-won, making Park squirm. He commits to tracking down the rumor starter. Turning to Kyung-soo's mom, Do-jun questions if her call for a board meeting was because of Hee-won. He subtly reminds her of their business contract, prompting an immediate apology from her. As Hee-won tries to stop him, Do-jun comforts her about the embarrassing situation while Kyung-soo's mom continues apologizing. Hee-won accepts her apology. Do-jun then suggests taking Hee-won away for a private chat since teaching the afternoon class might be too much for her. Principal Park agrees reluctantly, and they leave, leaving the secretary behind. In the parking lot, Do-jun and Hee-won sit in silence in his car. Breaking the silence, Hee-won asks how he found out and why he came to school. He reveals Se-hyun had called him, to which she thanks him. She voices her concerns about their lie being exposed easily. Smiling, he assures her it wouldn't be a lie since they're getting married in April. She protests that she can't just get married like that, April is practically here. He questions her resistance, and she fires back, asking why he unilaterally decided on this. Doesn't he care about what she wants? He coolly responds that if he didn't step in, she wouldn't have let the situation get so out of hand. Feeling cornered, she apologizes, admitting she's at a loss when he gets angry. He asks her bluntly, what is he to her? Why did he have to hear about the situation from her niece instead of her? She admits she kept him in the dark because she didn't want to burden him with her problems. He retorts, asking if she really has to treat him like a stranger. His disappointment is palpable when he tells her he hates seeing her standing there, head bowed. This triggers her anger. He insists he can't ignore matters involving his child and the child's mother. She reminds him sharply that they only had a one-night stand, and he knows nothing about who she truly is. Being with him is tough, and she feels uncomfortable around him. Tears start falling from her eyes, and he pulls her into a comforting embrace. When she finally stops crying, she apologizes for ruining his suit with her tears. Offering to dry clean it, he informs her the suit can't be dry cleaned. The only way she can make up for it is by marrying him, he jokes. She considers his proposal, accusing him of teasing her. He admits he enjoys teasing her, but then turns serious, asking why she doesn't want to marry him, love aside. After all, that could change after marriage. She confesses her fear. She knows it's best for their son, Do-jul, but she isn't convinced it's right for them. He reassures her, saying he's certain marriage is the right path. She should trust him and say yes to a wedding in April. She attempts to argue, but he cuts her off, insisting he's more capable than she thinks. He only needs her to say yes. Then he kisses her on the forehead. They share a quiet moment before he reminds her she hasn't answered yet. He warns her that if she doesn't respond in 3 seconds, he'll take her silence as agreement. As he starts counting, she braces herself. On the count of 3, he kisses her. Later that night, Hee-won lies in bed, mulling over the day's events. She can't believe she agreed to marry Do-jun. But then again, being married to someone who kisses like him might not be so bad. The thought makes her blush. Suddenly, Min-wook knocks and enters her room. He takes one look at her flushed face and comments that she looks terrible. She asks if he's ever heard of knocking as he saunters towards her bed. He shrugs and responds that he's been hollering your name for ages, but no response. She counters that maybe she was catching some Z's, to which he replies that he heard she'd left work early and assumed she was feeling under the weather. Spotting her puffy eyes, he ventures, been crying, while reaching out to her. She swiftly denies it and mock threatens to bite him if he dares touch her. In response, he gives her a playful swat on the head and exits, leaving behind an instruction for her to freshen up and join him for some chicken dinner he's brought over. Later, she emerges from her room to find Min-wook in the living room, getting the chicken ready. She inquires about Miran's whereabouts, to which he responds that Miran's family gathering is running a bit late but she'll be home soon. Hee-won wonders aloud if Miran's family had set her up on another blind date. Realizing she's just blurted this out to Miran's boyfriend, she puts a halt to her chatter. But he's heard enough and asks about these blind dates. Hee-won deflects his question with a quick, "Didn't you know?" and changes the subject by asking him why he's so hung up on her non-existent tears. They then switch gears and start talking about him. Over dinner, she nudges him about what he plans to do about Miran's blind dates. A while into their meal, Min-wook mentions his intentions to formally meet Miran's father. He seeks Hee-won's advice on how far he needs to go to make a good impression as a son-in-law. She reassures him that he's already perfect as he is. She reflects silently that his words would have hurt her not long ago, but now they don't sting. Probably because she's agreed to marry Do-jun. Min-wook returns to his earlier question about her tears, and she drops the bombshell she's set to tie the knot in April. He recovers from his shock to assume she means April next year. She corrects him, it's this April. The news floors him. He points out that April's just around the corner, and she shrugs, it just happened. Skeptical, Min-wook questions if it was Do-jun, the baby's father, who called the shots on the wedding date. Hee-won jumps to Do-jun's defense, saying it's not his fault, but Min-wook isn't convinced. He places a comforting hand on her shoulder, asking about the circumstances that led to such an impromptu wedding date. Just then, Miran walks in. Spotting Min-wook's hand on Hee-won's shoulder, she demands to know what's happening. Hee-won quickly denies anything and asks Min-wook to remove his hand. Min-wook invites Miran to join them, saying she should hear their conversation. But Miran refuses. Hee-won gets up to leave, hinting that Min-wook and Miran need to talk. As Min-wook tries to stop her, she tells him to mind his business. She then casually informs Miran about her upcoming April wedding, asking her to catch the bouquet, leaving Miran stunned. She promises to explain everything later and asks them to keep any arguments down. Back in her room, she locks the door behind her. Her long-standing crush on Min-wook is something she needs to let go of now that she's getting married. She thinks about how she's almost entirely over him. Days later, Hayen awkwardly tails Se-hyun around school. Post the incident with the woman, the school atmosphere has settled down. Principal Park addressed the students, urging them to avoid spreading baseless rumors. Hayen received a stern lecture in the principal's office. Hee-won returned to school the next day, acting as if nothing had happened. Everything returned to normal, except for the strained friendship between Se-hyun and Hayen. Se-hyun suggests they should get back to their old ways. Ariana replies that she feels bad, but Se-hyun quickly brushes it off as her own doing. With a self-deprecating grin, she confesses to being a chatterbox who just can't keep things to herself. Ariana, with a friendly jab, calls her out for being a goofball and playfully hauls her towards the soccer field. She's got some juicy gossip. There's a buzz about Tae-woo and the student teacher. At the field, Tae-woo is in action. He takes a kick at the ball, sending it whizzing past Jihun. A quick oops, my bad, from Tae-woo, and he's back in the game, while Jihun seethes on the sidelines. Ariana, always ready with commentary, notes Tae-woo's soccer prowess before explaining to a curious Se-hyun why Tae-woo and Jihun are sharing the field. Apparently, Tae-woo roped Jihun into this game. Ariana then spills the beans on how she ended up sharing Se-hyun's woes with Tae-woo. Now, Tae-woo seems to be giving Jihun a tough time on the field as payback. As she narrates the story, she suddenly drops a bombshell. She suspects Tae-woo has a soft spot for Se-hyun. This throws Se-hyun off balance. Ariana reassures her that she's pretty good at reading such cues and promises to back off if Tae-woo really does have feelings for Se-hyun. As Se-hyun tries to digest this news, Ariana pulls her attention back to the game just as Tae-woo takes a shot. The ball soars and smacks Jihun square in the face, much to everyone's shock. Cheers erupt from Tae-woo's teammates as Jihun reveals a bloody nose. Tae-woo rushes over, insisting it was an accident. Jihun, however, sees it differently and accuses Tae-woo of doing it intentionally because of Se-hyun. Tae-woo challenges Jihun about his behavior towards Se-hyun, which escalates the tension. In the midst of this drama, Tae-woo defuses the situation by announcing that Jihun has agreed to treat everyone to burgers since he lost the match. This unexpected announcement instantly lifts the mood and the crowd starts placing their orders. The atmosphere lightens as they cheer for Jihun's generosity while Se-hyun watches silently. The following day, Hee-won steps into the school, clearly nervous. She bumps into the vice principal, who awkwardly wishes her a great day. The next teacher she meets apologizes if he ever upset her. When she enters the staff office, she's met with silence and stares, making her feel out of place and alone. But just when things seem unbearable, Ms. Kim, a fellow teacher, approaches her and invites her to dinner, offering a glimmer of hope in an otherwise challenging day. That same evening, Hee-won and Ms. Kim decide to grab dinner together. As they're heading out, Ms. Kim, with an awkward chuckle, asks if Hee-won is experiencing any morning sickness. Realizing the question might be a bit too personal, she quickly apologizes. Hee-won, unfazed, assures her she's fine. They find a bench and sit down, an awkward silence hanging in the air. Hee-won breaks the silence by expressing gratitude to Ms. Kim for being there for her. Ms. Kim reassures her that no matter what's going on, Hee-won is still the same person to her. She apologizes if she's been a bit too careful around her lately. Then, with a curious twinkle in her eye, she admits she's dying to know all about Hee-won and Do-jun's relationship. Just as Hee-won brushes it off saying there's not much to tell, her phone rings. It's Do-jun. Do-jun's voice comes through the phone, asking if he can swing by to pick her up. The call reminds Hee-won of an appointment they had. She gives him the go-ahead, and he assures her he'll meet her at the school. Once the call ends, Ms. Kim teases Hee-won about the conversation sounding a bit dry. She thought there might be some sweet talk, but Hee-won just laughs it off and cancels their dinner plans. Later, as Do-jun drives Hee-won to their destination, a tense silence fills the car. Hee-won finally breaks it by asking about his father. She quickly clarifies that she's not trying to score points, but just wants to make a good first impression. Do-jun tells her not to worry about his parents, but the mention of parents makes Hee-won realize she'll be meeting Do-jun's mother too. She hadn't planned for this and starts to get nervous. Suddenly, she's reminded of a soap opera where the wealthy parents disapproved of their son's less fortunate girlfriend, even offering her money to leave him. The thought sends her into a spiral of anxiety. She starts wondering about her unborn child's future if Do-jun's parents don't approve of her. She even contemplates leaving the country. Sensing her distress, Do-jun places his hand on hers and asks what's on her mind. In a sudden outburst, she yells that she'll take the envelope, leaving him confused. His serious expression prompts her to ask about his siblings. He tells her it's just him and Se-hyun's father, but he has numerous cousins. He adds that if he ever suggests running away from a family gathering, she should follow him without question. This leaves her taken aback, but he assures her it's nothing serious, he just doesn't want her to get tangled up in family drama. As they pull up to their destination, Hee-won frantically searches for her mirror. Do-jun tells her she doesn't need it, she's already beautiful. Then, he leans over and plants a gentle kiss on her cheek. Inside the house, they sit opposite Do-jun's parents, an uncomfortable silence filling the room as they all sip their tea. Hee-won can't help but marvel at the sight before her, Daehan's group president Kang Chong-gil and his wife Han Suk-hee, right there in the flesh. The couple she'd seen countless times on the news now seemed so ordinary. They bicker away about food of all things, and Hee-won finds it surprisingly endearing. The conversation naturally shifts towards the topic of wedding plans. An April wedding, isn't that a tad rushed? Chong-gil muses aloud. Do-jun, however, casually brushes off his father's concerns, confidently assuring him that everything is under control. As for the matter of their future home, he's already delegated that task to his trusty secretary. All this while, Hee-won observes Do-jun's responses, thoroughly impressed by his meticulous planning. Yet, she can't shake off a sense of being sidelined. After all, no one seems to be asking her anything. She starts to wonder if she's being silently judged. Her train of thought is suddenly interrupted as Suk-hee addresses her directly. The unexpected term of endearment, daughter-in-law, takes Hee-won by surprise. Suk-hee wants to ask her something, and Hee-won braces herself for a volley of personal questions. To her relief, Suk-hee's question is rather simple: how did Do-jun win her over? The question catches everyone off guard, leading to immediate protests from both Do-jun and Chong-gil about its personal nature. Suk-hee, however, turns to Hee-won for her opinion. To everyone's relief, Hee-won doesn't mind answering. In fact, she candidly admits that it was she who chased after Do-jun, much to Suk-hee's delight. Hee-won is pleasantly surprised at how receptive and emotive Do-jun's mother turns out to be. Even when Suk-hee pushes for more details, despite the men's attempts to intervene, Hee-won finds it rather endearing. Suk-hee goes on to reveal that Do-jun has had his fair share of female admirers, with women regularly confessing their feelings to him. However, the mood shifts when Suk-hee casually mentions her sisters are on their way over. Do-jun isn't pleased, they had agreed to keep Hee-won away from the aunts for now, due to her condition. But it seems it's too late, the aunts are already on their way and will arrive by 7 p.m. As if on cue, the doorbell rings. Recalling Do-jun's advice about fleeing from family gatherings, Hee-won readies herself for a quick exit. Do-jun swiftly excuses them both, assuring his parents that the aunts will meet Hee-won at the wedding. Despite Chong-gil's protests, they manage to sneak out through the back. Once outside, they conceal themselves as the aunts make their boisterous entry. Do-jun swiftly picks up Hee-won and makes a dash for the gate, instructing her to grab his wallet from his jacket pocket. Their hasty escape is briefly interrupted by a blonde girl calling out Do-jun's name. Following his instructions, Hee-won hands over the money to the girl, whose eyes light up at the sight of the bills. She snags the cash, flashing him a cheeky grin and promising to turn a blind eye as he strolls by. In the same breath, she casually mentions a purse she's been eyeing, to which he replies with a nonchalant invitation to visit him at work the next day. She then introduces herself to Hee-won as Soo-jin, his cousin. As Do-jun speeds off, he apologizes to Hee-won for the hasty escape, explaining that his aunts can be a tad overwhelming, hence it's best to keep a safe distance. Hee-won, curious, asks him to explain what he meant by overwhelming. Do-jun describes them as excessively affectionate and high energy. Hee-won muses that they sound just like her father, who was always brimming with love. She then adds that perhaps it's better to have too much affection than too little. Do-jun, however, seems to think there's such a thing as too much love. After a brief silence, Do-jun suggests grabbing dinner, an idea Hee-won readily agrees to. Over dinner, Hee-won remarks on how nice Do-jun's parents seemed. She then playfully probes about his dating history, a question that renders him speechless. His silence makes her regret asking, but also fuels her curiosity. She figures that given his skills in bed, he must have been with quite a few women. Not that she has anyone to compare him to, but she knows he was her first taste of ecstasy. Seeing him lost in thought, she teases him about having so many exes he has to count them. Do-jun finally speaks up, sharing an advice from his married friends: it's best to take one's dating past to the grave. This comment irks Hee-won. He further adds that he's unsure whether to count those who barely feature in his past, leading Hee-won to pout in annoyance. Finding her sulking adorable, Do-jun can't help but call her cute. When she asks who he's referring to, he confesses about a brief 2-month fling with an actress named Young Hae-mi 4 years ago. Hee-won is taken aback when she realizes it's the Young Hae-mi. Do-jun explains that he was too busy learning his family business then, and couldn't handle Hae-mi's constant attention. Hee-won is baffled that he found Hae-mi's attention stressful. But Do-jun insists he didn't find her that attractive and disliked his plans being disrupted. Hee-won finds herself mulling over his words, realizing that ever since they met, nothing has gone as per his plan. She wonders if she's the exception. The thought is interrupted when Do-jun suggests they stop by the mall to pick something for her mom for their dinner the next day. Hee-won assures him that her mom isn't like most moms, and flowers would be just fine. Elsewhere, Se-hyun walks home, lost in thoughts about Arayani's revelation about Taewoo's feelings for her. As she recalls Taewoo's description of his ideal girl, a stranger stops her, asking if she's Se-hyun. Se-hyun looks at the girl standing in front of her and asks who she is. The girl introduces herself as Kim Da-hye, a broadcasting student in her 3rd year. Se-hyun quickly puts 2 and 2 together, realizing why the senior student is hanging around Taewoo's place, even though he's just a sophomore. She asks Da-hye if she's waiting for Taewoo, and when Da-hye confirms, Se-hyun suggests they chat at a nearby cafe. In the cafe, Se-hyun is the only one to order something to eat. Da-hye declines, claiming she's already full. Se-hyun then asks Da-hye if she's free on Saturday at 2 p.m. When Da-hye inquires why, Se-hyun reveals her plan to set her up with Taewoo. Da-hye agrees to meet, prompting Se-hyun to ask if she's into sports. Da-hye shares that she plays a bit of tennis and ping-pong, which makes Se-hyun smile because Taewoo loves tennis. Se-hyun then brings up Da-hye's blonde hair, asking if it's dyed. Da-hye admits she colored it over spring break. Se-hyun tells her Taewoo isn't a fan of dyed hair or heavy makeup. She also mentions he doesn't like it when girls wear miniskirts or too tight clothes, remembering all the times Taewoo complained about her outfits. Da-hye doesn't seem bothered, stating that his dislikes make him seem thoughtful. Se-hyun happily declares that they're a perfect match, promising to support them fully. Da-hye, however, wonders why Se-hyun is so keen on helping her. She suggests that maybe Se-hyun likes Taewoo and is trying to sabotage her chances. Se-hyun is taken aback, wondering why everyone thinks she's into Taewoo. She assures Da-hye that she and Taewoo are practically family. Da-hye shares that all the girls thought Taewoo had a thing for Se-hyun. Se-hyun dismisses the idea, explaining they only hang out because they live next door to each other. She insists Taewoo doesn't see her that way, and it frustrates her when people assume there's something going on between them. After Da-hye leaves, Se-hyun is determined to ensure no one ever mistakes her feelings for Taewoo again. The following day, Do-jun and Hee-won head to meet her mom. Hee-won warns Do-jun that it will be like a soap opera with moments of confusion and frustration. They arrive at the private dining room where her mom is already waiting. It's exactly as Hee-won expected, an awkward silence filled with unspoken tension. When the waitress arrives to take their drink orders, Do-jun orders juice for Hee-won. This catches her mom's attention. She directly asks Hee-won if she's pregnant. Caught off guard, Hee-won remains silent, but Do-jun steps in, referring to Hee-won's mom as his mother-in-law, and taking responsibility for the pregnancy. Her mom isn't thrilled about this new title, making Hee-won uneasy. Hee-won breaks the news to her mom about the April wedding. Her mom agrees to attend but makes it clear she won't do anything more. The meeting ends abruptly with her mom leaving. Hee-won is left apologizing to Do-jun for her mom's behavior. Overwhelmed, she breaks down in tears. Do-jun comforts her, joking that he should have brought a handkerchief after all. So, after that, the big day is set for Saturday, April 22nd at 2 p.m. With a baby on the way and a wedding to coordinate, Hee-won feels like she's balancing on a tightrope. The question of whether they can pull off a perfect wedding in such a short time frame looms large in her mind. But much to her surprise, everything starts falling into place, just like a perfectly designed jigsaw puzzle. Her pregnancy grants her an exemption from most of the wedding prep, with the exception of posing for the wedding photos. All other preparations are seamlessly managed by Do-jun's secretarial staff and his mother, who prove to be experts in wedding planning. In this flurry of activity, Hee-won finds an unexpected ally in Secretary Lee. His constant grumbles about Do-jun's tendency to deviate from plans somehow make him seem more approachable. As she watches Suk-hee, Do-jun, and Secretary Lee handle the tasks she assumed would be hers, she can't help but feel a sense of displacement. On the other hand, her mother remains conspicuously absent, leaving her father to smooth over any potential issues. Secretary Lee, always the efficient professional, has shortlisted 3 potential homes for Hee-won and Do-jun. Without even seeing them, Do-jun finds fault with each one: too small, inadequate yard, undesirable location. Yet, Secretary Lee doesn't back down and persuades them to give the houses a chance. His firm tone leaves Hee-won slightly unnerved. They embark on their house-hunting journey with Do-jun behind the wheel. It feels strangely intimate, being alone together after so long. Their first stop is the house that Do-jun dismissed due to its location. To Hee-won, it doesn't look so bad. Do-jun offhandedly mentions his brother's house nearby and the ample backyard space for future children. Hee-won raises an eyebrow at his unilateral planning, but lets it pass. His mention of Do-jul having friends over leaves her blushing. Inside the dark house, as she searches for the light switch, Do-jun moves closer, backing her into a wall. She questions his intentions, to which he points out the light switch and teases her about expecting something else. As she tries to create some distance, he holds her hand, revealing his true intentions. He leans in, praising her natural scent that always drives him wild, before planting a kiss on her. Their moment of intimacy is abruptly interrupted by a small voice saying, "Kithing." They freeze, turning to find a little kid watching them with wide-eyed curiosity. Hee-won gently pulls away from Do-jun and turns to the little girl, asking her name. The kid replies, "Cha Yun-soo." Do-jun, a bit sternly, asks her where her parents are and why she snuck into someone else's house. Hee-won chides him for being too harsh, then kneels down to ask Yun-soo how she got in. The kid points to a door, saying her parents are outside. Hee-won suggests they go find them. As they step outside, Yun-soo keeps repeating "Kith" until a woman's voice calls out her name. Yun-soo dashes towards her mom, who's crossing a bridge, connecting their houses. Hee-won asks Do-jun about the bridge. He mentions Secretary Lee had mentioned it in his report, adding it would be removed. Suddenly, Hee-won recognizes Yun-soo's mom as Yoon-hee-soo, the famous novelist. Do-jun seems surprised, asking if she's really that well known. Hee-won, a longtime fan, confirms it and asks if he knows the Cha family. He admits to knowing President Cha a bit. Hee-won tells him she loves the house and asks if they can take it. He points out it needs work before they can move in. She suggests they stay at his current place while renovating, pleading with him to agree. He does. As they talk, Se-hyun approaches them and Hee-won excitedly confesses she's a big fan. When Se-hyun inquires about the house, Hee-won says it's fantastic and that they've decided to keep the bridge, much to Se-hyun's delight. Yun-soo chirps "Kith" again, telling her mom she saw the scary man and the pretty lady Kith, or kiss. At that moment, President Cha arrives, scooping up Yun-soo in his arms. He greets Do-jun, mentioning he often sees his brother Han-jun. The conversation veers towards the upcoming wedding. Do-jun invites him and his wife, and President Cha teases him about living near Han-jun. Do-jun admits he did have reservations, but his wife-to-be loves the house. He wraps an arm around Hee-won, announcing her pregnancy and their plans for a child-friendly backyard. Se-hyun, also pregnant, suggests they go for hospital visits together. Do-jun, however, insists on accompanying Hee-won for all appointments. Despite a bit of resistance from Hee-won, Do-jun stands firm. President Cha asks about their moving-in date and the bridge. When his wife mentions Hee-won's fondness for the bridge, he offers to keep it if Do-jun agrees. With Hee-won giving him pleading eyes, Do-jun relents, making her day. Later that night, Hee-won sits alone in her empty room, her belongings already moved to Do-jun's place. Their honeymoon is postponed. Suddenly, Miran knocks and enters, a departure from her usual barging in. Hee-won points this out, to which Miran tells her to stop fussing and join her outside. Hee-won is lounging at her desk, clearly not in the mood to move. Miran nudges her, reminding her that her wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. "Don't you want to look your best?" she asks, as she bustles around preparing face masks. As she gets ready to pamper Hee-won, Miran casually inquires if Hee-won and Do-jun have figured out their living arrangements. Hee-won casually drops that Se-hyun is going to be their next-door neighbor. Miran is taken aback, exclaiming her surprise. Miran then shifts to a more serious topic. "Are you happy, Hee-won?" she asks. She shares that her dad wants her back home since her reason for living with Hee-won no longer holds. Miran teases Hee-won about her pregnancy, asking why she had to go and stomp all over her freedom. Hee-won apologizes half-heartedly and cheekily suggests Miran marry Min-wook. Miran retorts that Min-wook hasn't popped the question yet. Hee-won playfully suggests that Miran could propose first. As they banter, Miran orders Hee-won to lie down for the face mask. Hee-won probes further about Miran's thoughts on marrying Min-wook. Miran confesses that she feels smaller, less confident around him. Hee-won encourages her, assuring her that Min-wook loves her more than she knows. This makes Miran tear up. After applying the face mask, Miran asks Hee-won if she's okay with marrying without love. Hee-won assures her she likes Do-jun, he's not excessively cold like her mom or overly passionate like her dad, which suits her just fine. Miran wonders if their friendship will remain the same after Hee-won's marriage. Hee-won jokingly denies being close with Miran. On the wedding day, Do-jun's aunts gush over Hee-won, who's already decked out in her wedding gown. They share stories of Do-jun as a baby and compliment Hee-won on her looks and her match with Do-jun. Suk-hee eventually shoos them away for the photo session. Hee-won poses with Do-jun's cousins, her relatives, school teachers, students, friends, and other guests. By the end, she's worn out. Alone at last, Min-wook walks in, gives her a hug, and fondly remarks on her growth. He reminds her that he's there for her, calling himself Appa. When Hee-won points out that she was born first, Min-wook changes the subject, asking if she cried. Before he can answer, Do-jun steps in, warning Min-wook to back off from his bride-to-be. The two men exchange heated words and glares, each promising the other will regret it if they hurt Hee-won. After Min-wook leaves, Do-jun checks in on Hee-won. She assures him she's fine and enjoyed meeting his jovial aunts and cousins. Do-jun leans in for a kiss, complaining about the wedding formalities keeping his bride away from him. He praises her beauty, making her heart flutter. Just then, Kim Hayen, a beautiful girl, barges in, hugging Do-jun, and leaving him in shock. In a blink, Hee-won's about to ask who this sudden intruder is when another person pops into the room, announcing it's time for Do-jun to get ready for the ceremony. Do-jun strides out without introducing Hayen, leaving Hee-won puzzled and a tad bit annoyed. Just then, Soo-jin peeks in, looking surprised at Hayen's presence. Do-jun asks her to take Hayen away, and Hayen quickly explains herself as Soo-jin's buddy from way back. She adds that she's been studying in France and jetted back as soon as she heard about Do-jun's wedding. She also casually mentions how much she missed Do-jun. Just as Hee-won's about to ask more, Soo-jin calls Hayen and they leave after wishing Hee-won a great wedding. After their exit, Hee-won feels a twinge of uneasiness but brushes it off as pre-wedding jitters. As the ceremony kicks off, Do-jun is at his attentive best, caring for Hee-won throughout. She even has to console her dad, who's a waterfall of tears. They're swarmed by the aunts post-ceremony, prompting them to sneak away from the reception. Unbeknownst to them, Hee-won spots Hayen watching them from afar. Fast forward to Hee-won getting out of her shower and finding lingerie laid out on the bed. The room is a sea of rose petals, making her gasp in surprise. When Do-jun walks in, he finds his wife hiding under the covers. He asks why she's bundled up and she claims that's how she usually sleeps. He pulls the cover off, only to have her yank it back, complaining about the awkward sleepwear, which makes Do-jun burst into laughter. He explains that his mom and aunts were behind the elaborate setup. He playfully tries to get a peek at the lingerie, but she firmly keeps the covers on. She then asks him to button up his pajamas. He chuckles, saying his friends told him wedding night PJs are meant to be taken off easily. He reaches for the cover again, leaving Hee-won blushing and flustered. She requests him to turn off the lights, but he refuses, just gazing at her. She blushes more and pleads with him to stop staring. Unable to resist any longer, he pulls her into a hug which sends her heart racing. Hee-won can hear the rhythmic thump of his heartbeat, steady and soothing. Gently, he nudges her onto the bed, asking if he could indulge his desires, just for tonight. He kisses her hand softly, confessing that she has no idea how she affects him, and then he leans in to kiss her. Some time later, they're lying together, their bodies entwined. Hee-won shifts a bit, causing him to ask if she's uncomfortable. She expresses concern about his arm getting cramped, suggesting they should sleep comfortably. He reassures her that he's perfectly cozy and pulls her even closer. She complains about the lack of space, to which he insists that he wants to sleep just like this, and she should get used to it. When she asks if he also finds it slightly awkward, being unused to sharing a bed, he agrees to adapt. When she proposes creating some distance between them, he outright refuses, joking that she might leave 250,000 won bills and bolt again, while tightening his grip around her. She retorts that she has no reason to run away now, and he reminds her that he knows both her workplace and her name, making it easier to track her down. She curiously asks if he had searched for her, to which he admits that he did for a month. When she questions why, he says he wanted to understand why she left him 100,000 won, and if that's all he was worth to her. He confesses that the memory of the mysterious woman who left him without even sharing her name had dented his ego. She apologizes and clarifies that the money had no hidden meaning, it was all she had that day. As a result, she had to trudge all the way to the train station in the biting cold. He teasingly asks if their night together was so special that she felt compelled to give him all she had. She cheekily tells him he's free to interpret it any way he wants. When he continues to tease her, she turns away, announcing she's going to sleep. He pulls her closer and drifts off to sleep. She soon follows suit. The next morning, Hee-won is up with a start, yelling about being late for work. She begins to berate Miran for not waking her up, but stops mid-sentence as she remembers it's Sunday, and more importantly, she's now a married woman. The memories of the previous night make her blush. Just then, her husband strolls into the room, inviting her for breakfast. Savoring the scrumptious breakfast, Hee-won catches Do-jun gazing at her. She teases him about it, asking if he's the master chef behind the meal. He chuckles and admits that his mom deserves the culinary credit. He then throws a playful question at her, asking if she finds cooking men attractive. She responds with a no, but adds that knowing how to cook is definitely a useful skill. Taking it in stride, Do-jun jokingly suggests that it'd be unfair to the world if a man as amazing as him could also cook. But then, he promises to learn if she wants him to. When he asks what her favorite dish is, she mentions kimchi stew. He proudly states that he can whip that up even without any cooking lessons. Suddenly, Hee-won spots a shopping bag and curiously checks its contents. Do-jun explains that it's a gift from his aunts, something about matching aprons. The idea of Do-jun donning an apron and cooking tickles her, and she insists he should use it while preparing meals. He laughs and promises to consider it. Post-breakfast, Hee-won finds herself lounging on the sofa, engrossed in a good book. Do-jun comes over and places a tray of fresh fruits beside her. As she munches on the fruits, she muses to herself that had she known married life would be this pampered, she would have tied the knot sooner. This thought brings a smile to her face. Noticing her smile, Do-jun inquires about the book she's reading. She dodges the question, turning the tables, by asking about his plans. He shares that he's organizing his schedule for the upcoming week. She feigns disinterest but then expresses that having a rough idea about his schedule could be beneficial. When she hesitates, worried that she's overstepping, he reassures her that it's natural for her to be curious about his activities. She hurriedly clarifies that she didn't want to pry and make him uncomfortable. He pulls her closer, showing her his packed schedule. With the wedding coming up sooner than planned, he had to cancel and reschedule all his meetings for the week. At this, she questions if there was a wedding plan she wasn't aware of. Trying to avoid the topic, Do-jun excuses himself to fix lunch. Undeterred, Hee-won follows him into the kitchen, grilling him about a secret wedding plan. He attempts to divert the conversation, which only earns him a stern look from her. Eventually, he confesses that he set a date for the wedding, confident that he could win her over. This revelation stuns her. She questions why he seemed so certain about their marriage, while she was constantly wrestling with doubts. She wondered if they could build a happy family despite their different backgrounds and limited interactions. If not for Jihun's rumors forcing Do-jun to announce their wedding, she might still be hesitant. But Do-jun never seemed to hesitate, and she wants to know why. Do-jun explains that he felt the need to take responsibility and found her a fitting partner to share that responsibility with. Do-jun tentatively asks if she's upset, but she dismisses his concern, claiming she's just tired. As she heads off to bed, she can't help but feel a little disappointed. She'd been hoping for a more heartfelt reason behind his decision to marry her, like maybe he had feelings for her too. But all she got was a practical answer about shared responsibilities. The realization that she might be falling for him harder than she thought hits her like a ton of bricks. In the kitchen, Do-jun offers to cook eel for dinner. She shrugs, telling him to do what he likes. As she idly picks up his tablet, she notices her name listed in his schedule for the day. Curious, she asks him about it. Joining her on the couch, Do-jun explains that spending time with her is his way of rewarding himself after 4 long months. Slightly taken aback, she points out that he's been on his feet all day because of her, hardly a reward. He insists that despite having to postpone their honeymoon, clearing his schedule to spend time with her feels like a reward. He admits that while he works a lot, it doesn't mean he enjoys it. What he truly enjoys is being with her. He pulls her into his arms and cheekily asks if his words have touched her heart. He then playfully asks for a kiss, and they share a tender moment. A few days later, at the school nurse's office, a couple of teachers and the nurse are engaged in a hushed conversation. They discuss how Hee-won's marriage to the chairman has made things awkward for them. Ms. Choi even insinuates that their rushed wedding was only because Hee-won was pregnant, and predicts that she'll be kicked out once the baby is born. The nurse, Ms. Kim, attempts to defend Hee-won, but her words fall on deaf ears. Unknown to them, Hee-won overhears the entire conversation just as she's about to enter the nurse's office. Feeling drained, Hee-won retreats to a nearby bench. She's been feeling unusually tired lately and was hoping to catch a quick nap before her next class. The overheard conversation weighs heavily on her mind. She knew her marriage had made her colleagues uncomfortable, but hearing their cruel words hurt more than she'd expected. She wonders if Do-jun only married her because of Do-jul and if he would have married any woman who was carrying his child. As these thoughts cloud her mind, she finds unexpected company in Se-hyun, who joins her on the bench, looking as lost as she feels. Hee-won gives Se-hyun a once-over, and with a raised eyebrow asks, "What's up with you?" Se-hyun counters with a question of her own, "Did you and Do-jun have a spat?" Hee-won waves away the question, turning the focus back on Se-hyun. Is Tae-woo being a pain in the neck again? Se-hyun shrugs, revealing that Tae-woo has a girlfriend now, which means she's off the hook. He initially seemed miffed when he introduced his new girl, but now they're practically joined at the hip. She then recounts how she played matchmaker for Tae-woo and Da-hai. She'd set it up so that Dae would walk into a restaurant where she was hanging out with Tae-woo, making it seem like a chance encounter. She asked Tae-woo if Dae could join them, and he just gave her a puzzled look. Hee-won, amused, asked Se-hyun what her endgame was. Se-hyun admits that while she wanted Tae-woo to have a girlfriend, she's not entirely thrilled with the outcome. Hee-won reminds her that midterms are looming, and she shouldn't be wasting energy thinking about all this. Seeing Se-hyun's surprised expression, Hee-won quickly adds that she's speaking as a teacher. But then, shifting gears, she asks Se-hyun, as an aunt, whether she really dislikes hanging out with Tae-woo. Se-hyun admits that while Tae-woo can be infuriating at times, she doesn't exactly hate it. Hee-won advises her to take some time to figure out what Tae-woo means to her. Se-hyun denies any romantic feelings, but Hee-won encourages her to think it through. As Se-hyun stammers out a confession, Hee-won tells her that taking action, whether it's to reflect or act on her feelings, is better than doing nothing at all. Se-hyun points out that Hee-won is also guilty of the same thing. Hee-won looks down at her wedding ring and agrees, stating that being proactive is generally better than being passive. They should both aim to be more assertive. Suddenly, a student tosses some snacks and drinks at Se-hyun. She asks him what they are, and he shrugs, saying he doesn't know. She wonders if they're from Tae-woo, but the student has no idea. That evening, Hee-won arrives at her apartment with Do-jun, when Hayen pops up out of nowhere, startling her. Hayen asks if this is where she lives with Do-jun. When Hee-won confirms, Hayen mentions she's here to see someone and suggests they go in together. As they ride the elevator, Hayen chatters non-stop while Hee-won tries to figure out what's going on. Something about Hayen sets off alarm bells in Hee-won's mind, the same unease she felt during their encounter at the wedding. She notices that Hayen hasn't selected a floor and tries to ask her about it, but Hayen brushes her off, launching into a story about her time in France. Once they reach Hee-won's floor, Hayen follows her out of the elevator. Hee-won asks who she's visiting, and Hayen apologizes for getting sidetracked and leaves. Hee-won enters her home, unaware that Hayen is watching her. Later that night, Do-jun comes home to find Hee-won asleep on the couch. He gently carries her to their bedroom. She wakes up in the middle of the night, finding herself snuggled against her husband. She wonders when she fell asleep and decides to ask Do-jun the question that's been on her mind first thing in the morning. After a long day at school, Hee-won spots a car idling outside. She assumes it's Do-jun, come to pick her up. But as she approaches the vehicle, she realizes it's not Do-jun, but his trusty secretary, Lee. As they cruise through the city, Hee-won casually asks about Do-jun's schedule. Lee chuckles, saying Do-jun's been burning the midnight oil, just so he can clock out earlier. Apparently, he's currently in a meeting that should wrap up within half an hour. Lee adds that Do-jun's been itching to get home since lunch. Hee-won guesses Do-jun must be tired, but Lee corrects her, saying Do-jun could work late nights for a week without batting an eyelid. Lee then drops a bombshell. Ever since Hee-won came into the picture, their office hours have reduced and Do-jun's moods have improved. The staff couldn't be happier. Hee-won dismisses this, pointing out that Do-jun still works from home. She recalls a recent incident where Do-jun had trouble focusing because she was around. When she offered to leave, he protested, saying her absence would be even more distracting. Then he'd kissed her. Snapping out of her reverie, she finds Lee grinning at her. He teases her about daydreaming about Do-jun, but she denies it, claiming she was thinking about her students. Lee feigns disappointment, joking that it's sad Do-jun lost to a bunch of kids. Arriving at her apartment building, Hee-won scans the area for any sign of Hayen before heading up. All she wants is for Do-jun to be home, so they can talk. But as she steps into her apartment, she's greeted by the tantalizing aroma of food. Thinking it's Do-jun, she heads to the kitchen, only to find Hayen there, wearing their apron. Hayen greets her casually, informing Hee-won that Do-jun isn't back yet. Stunned, Hee-won asks how Hayen got in. But instead of answering, Hayen just continues chopping onions, asking Hee-won to repeat her question. Overwhelmed, Hee-won rushes to the bathroom to throw up. From the bathroom, she hears Do-jun come home and question Hayen about her presence. Hayen skillfully evades his queries, steering the conversation towards the pasta she's preparing. When Do-jun persists, Hayen lies, claiming Hee-won gave her the passcode and address yesterday. Listening to them, Hee-won feels like an outsider in her own home. It's as if Hayen knows more about Do-jun than she does. She wonders if the passcode to their house is Do-jun's birthday and realizes she didn't know he liked pasta. When she finally emerges from the bathroom, both Do-jun and Hayen turn to look at her. But before anyone can say anything, she bolts, with Do-jun hot on her heels. But Hayen stops him, grabbing his arm. Hee-won's eyes brim with tears as she steps past a shady-looking fellow on the street. She whispers to her unborn child, a soft mantra, crying doesn't solve anything. It's a lesson she learned young, when her parents' fights would reduce her to tears, and she'd wake up the next day to find nothing had changed. She ponders why she feels so raw, so vulnerable. Could it be she's been relying on Do-jun more than she thought? Her heart sinks as she suspects he's probably still with Hayen, considering he didn't come chasing after her as she'd half expected. Suddenly, she realizes she's in unfamiliar surroundings, her slippers slapping against the concrete. A spike of panic jolts through her when she finds her pockets empty, no phone, no wallet. She recalls passing a convenience store nearby and decides to head back there to borrow a phone. Just as she's about to turn around, she spots a figure approaching from the shadows of the alley. Panic flares up again as she wills herself to move, but her feet refuse to cooperate. She stands there, heart hammering in her chest, hoping the stranger just walks past her. As the man reaches out to touch her shoulder, Do-jun appears out of nowhere and yanks him away. He confronts the stranger, demanding to know why he was trying to touch his wife. The man explains that he saw Hee-won crying and looking lost, and had only wanted to help. Do-jun reaches out to comfort Hee-won, but hesitates. The stranger suggests calling the cops, but Do-jun quickly clarifies that Hee-won is his wife. As the man leaves, he mutters something about treating wives better, even going as far as saying he'd treat her like a queen if she were his wife. He then proceeds to dial the cops. Hee-won wipes away her tears, informing Do-jun about the impending police call. He implores her to hug him before he gets arrested. When she doesn't respond, he confesses how scared he was when he couldn't find her and invites her to vent her anger on him. He's sweating profusely, which makes her wonder if he's been running around looking for her. She finally gives in and hugs him. He reciprocates, expressing his relief and admitting his mistake of trusting Hayen too easily. Do-jun explains that 5 years ago, Hayen was obsessed with him to an unhealthy extent. His lawyer had even filed a suit against her. But Hayen's father, who was Do-jun's high school teacher, begged him to go easy on her. When Do-jun saw Hayen at their wedding, he contacted her father, who assured him Hayen was better now. Do-jun swears to Hee-won that he'll never let anything like this happen again. They share another hug, and he suggests they head home. But she shakes her head, indicating she's not ready just yet. Hee-won wrinkles her nose and says that she's not ready to head back home yet, thanks to the lingering smell. Instead, she proposes they spend the night at a hotel. Do-jun agrees without hesitation, suggesting they take a walk over to the nearest hotel. As they start on their way, he offers to carry her, but she shrugs him off, saying she's fine. He then points at her slippers and advises her to get proper shoes for the walk. She clings to his arm tightly as they move along, causing him to ask if she's still worried about him getting arrested. She admits that she just wants to avoid any more trouble that night. Suddenly, she erupts into giggles. When Do-jun inquires about the cause of her amusement, she teases him about his high standards in women, pointing out that both Hayen and Hae-mi are stunning. She adds that he's constantly surrounded by beauty, but never seems to notice, making her wonder if he's ever been captivated by a woman's beauty before. Do-jun admits he has indeed found a woman beautiful. He describes her as a sexy lady with high standards, who may seem shy at first glance, but is actually sharp-witted. He also mentions her slight clumsiness, which he finds incredibly endearing, especially when she's dressed in black. Oblivious to the fact that Do-jun is describing her, Hee-won visualizes this mystery woman in her mind and feels a pang of jealousy. She silently grumbles, wishing he had just said outright that she was the beautiful woman he was referring to. As they approach a crosswalk, Do-jun places a hand on her shoulder to guide her, only for her to brush it away. He chuckles at her reaction, which only prompts her to ask why he's laughing. He tells her he's suddenly in a good mood, causing her to retort that she's not, and he should stop laughing. She blames him for her sour mood, accusing him of talking about another woman, despite being a novice at dating. In response, Do-jun takes her hand and reassures her that it's too late for her to leave him now, and he can't imagine his life without her. Her cheeks flush at his words. She reassures him that she has no plans to leave, especially since they're responsible for Do-jul. Do-jun admits that he had momentarily forgotten about Do-jul, but Hee-won doesn't catch his comment. He then shifts the conversation back to how she had dashed out of the house without her phone or purse. She apologizes and admits that she was feeling unwell. When he asks if it was morning sickness, she confesses that she isn't sure, but the smell of the pasta had made her nauseous. Do-jun apologizes for Hayen's actions once more, and when she asks what he intends to do about Hayen, he firmly states that he won't let her get away with it this time. Hee-won then steers the conversation back to the woman he described earlier, remarking that he didn't end up with her. To her surprise, Do-jun counters by asking who said he didn't. Flustered, she accuses him of lying about only dating Haemi, and wonders if the woman he described is another celebrity. To that, Do-jun replies that the woman is standing right next to him. Realizing that he's been describing her all along, Hee-won accuses him of teasing her. Do-jun reminds her of the little black dress she wore when they first met. He places a hand on her waist, commenting that her figure took his breath away that day, and leans in to kiss her. But just as their lips are about to meet, an elderly man passing by clears his throat loudly, grumbling about young people these days. Do-jun quickly apologizes, explaining that his wife is so beautiful, he forgot they were standing on a sidewalk. The old man continues to mutter as he walks away, leaving the couple to head into the hotel. I don't know about you, but I'm loving this story so far. If you want us to upload the third and final part, please comment Do-jun below. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao.